watching a lot of the new films that are coming out in regards to AI systems and whatnot. I think even in iRobot, the recent Isaac Asimov rendition of that film, they have an AI system which is female, which is very common as well. Actually, if you look at a lot of sci-fi, it's always a female kind of artificial intelligence system, which has this almost sexual voice, pleasurable sexual feminine voice. Do you think that's part of this idea as well, that this is what they probably will develop if we ever get this far in regards to technology? I think that this is the way they're going to go. I think even some of our GPS system almost have this kind of voice now. I don't know if you heard that or not, but it's just it's ridiculous to me. But this seems to be what they're playing on, right, Lenon?
Yes, and part of it, because in terms of the psychology, what has been done over time in terms of human consciousness is we have been so indoctrinated to accepting the sexualization of an object as being the reasoning behind we purchase something, or the reasoning behind why we like something, or why we appreciate something, or why we feel that something is valuable, to see it as having a sexual relevance. That is part of the psychology, and we've been trained to do that. That's not something that's innate in us as human beings. Over time, we have been trained. That's why, it's interesting, because beer doesn't taste good. Now, I should tell, like, I've never drunk alcohol, but when I was a child, my dad, one time, he was drinking a beer, and I said, "Hey, Dad, I want to taste it." And he said, "You sure?" I said, "Yeah." So he put a little bit on the tip. He said, "Go ahead and taste it." And I tasted it, and it tasted horrible, right? So not only does it taste horrible, but it's in terms of how it affects human consciousness and how it affects the human body, it's very detrimental. So how then can you sell something that is distasteful to someone, something that is damaging to someone? How can you sell that to them, to where they actually perceive it as being something that's valuable and really worthwhile of paying for and consuming? Well, what has happened over time is, if you can sexualize it, then you can tap into a level of consciousness within every single human being as creative beings, and using sex as a means of creation. You can tap into that and use that against them. It's a form of psychosexualization of an object. And so what has happened is, over time, we have really come into, it's almost like a program within what we call the matrix that really dictates to us that how we perceive something as being valuable or worthwhile is that it has to have a certain kind of sexual attraction to us. So what has happened is that technology has been so sexualized, and one of the ways that it's been done is through the feminization of certain kinds of aspects of technology. So therefore, if you can feminize technology and make it appealing on a sexual level, because see, this may be getting a little bit off topic, but most men, when we see a woman, we perceive them on a certain kind of level that's different than how women perceive men. Meaning that when I, for instance, when I was single, when I would perceive a woman, I would literally, with my eyes, I would take in her image of what she appeared to be as a woman. Now, women, on the other hand, I'm talking about traditionally speaking, they don't, in my experience, they don't perceive men on that same kind of level. What they really pick up on is a sort of spiritual dimension as to what they are seeing. They don't look at face value first. They look more at the deeper, intricate aspects of what they are perceiving with their eyes. And because of that, it's more difficult to manipulate the consciousness sexually of women than it is for men. Now, a lot of this has to do with this in terms of our physiology and what we do, in terms of our sexual interaction. So I don't mean to get too much off topic, but I want to relate this to why the sexualization of technology at the forefront deals with the manipulation of what I call the manhood archetypes consciousness. That much of the sexualization of technology has been feminized because the appeal wants to be directed and has consciously been directed at the male archetype more so than the female archetype. And that in and of itself is a powerful reality that really has to be addressed. I don't really get into that so much inside my next film, but it is an important aspect of what we're dealing with.
It's a very important point, and I'm glad you brought it up, because again, I wanted to kind of ask you if you think that, I at least think that this is a reflection of the fact that this technology also is a component of men. It's developed by the male brain, so to speak, and which means that it's also being sold to the male brain in that sense. And it feels to me that we can also see that technology in most cases are being differently handled and utilized by men. It seems to generally, if we generalize a little bit here, it feels to me that females are a little bit more uncomfortable with certain technologies, while men are more comfortable with it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree. And you can even look at just society as a whole. Most people who are walking around with certain kinds of technology. It's interesting because I remember one time I happened to be at a golf course, and it was for a conference, but it was at a golf course. And you see all these, males walking around, and there was guys that had literally had these robotic golf carts, not golf carts, but like their bag, their golf bag. I'm not sure what they call it, but I always wanted to play. I always wanted to play golf, but I never was able, never got an opportunity. But where they put their golf clubs into the bags, it was a robot that you put the golf, and then you push a button, and if you want a certain club, you push a certain button, and then the robot will pull out the club and you pick it up, right? So I just think in terms of, and you see this over and over again in terms of in society in general, the over dependency on by the masculine principle on technology to a greater degree than what we find within in general than what we find by the feminine principle. And part of it is, and this really upsets people when I speak in these terms, but as a father, as a man, and as someone who has been in a relationship with my wife for a decade now and have observed how she has interacted, and through observing her recognizing the same types of principles in other women, I have realized that in terms of having deeper spiritual connections to who and what we are, women have a greater understanding and have a greater power in terms of keeping those types of constructs in place, in terms of who and what we are as human beings. Part of it has to do with their innate ability to create within themselves life through their womb. It's an internal process. They have it already within them, so therefore they don't need technology to be used for them to create something profound. So men having a deficiency. Now, I'm not saying that men are, I'm a man myself. I'm not saying that we are less than or anything. I'm just recognizing certain aspects of how we chose to manifest here. That, in fact, men, we have a deficiency, a natural deficiency in terms of being able to hold life within us and manifest life within us and bring forth life through us. I'm talking about human life. We have a deficiency. So therefore, what has happened is technology has been really subliminally projected into our consciousness as a means to experience the same level of creativity, supposedly, that women already have innately. And that psychology has been used against us to a great degree.
Okay, let's see here then. Speaking of technology then, Lenon, we just got cut off here on one of our computers froze up, but you were just talking about a very important point there, actually. We were talking about this idea because I wanted to ask you about the potential jealousy of the creator aspect, so to speak. It feels to me that men are in some way a little bit jealous, that they don't really understand this idea of creating a life. It's a mystery. It's something that is unknown to the male mentality in a way, and to kind of make up for that in a way, it seems that to me that we've kind of tried to create technology as a means of creating something of our own. What do you think? Is that what's going on here? And is that, again, to reiterate, is that why a lot of males are attracted to technology as opposed to women, do you think?
Yeah, and that is part of it. One of the things I just thought about while you were speaking was when we talk about technology, it's really like an external creation. So however, when women create life, it's an internal process in terms of what's taking place within their bodies. And I would even go so far as to say, and just within my own experience, and again, we're talking in generalization, so I'm not saying this about all men, and this includes myself, because I even criticize myself on some levels in terms of how I interact with my wife. That part of the reason why we see a sort of domination of men over women in many different aspects of our interactions, socially, politically, spiritually. There's always this dominance, like this idea, like I've seen it time and time again, where men will say things like, women don't have the right to be a head of a church. They don't have a right to steer people in terms of their spiritual evolution. And part of that there's a direct relationship to that level of domination. And it goes back to this level of imbalance in terms of men having a subconscious awareness that they are on some levels deficient in relationship to women. So instead of embracing the qualities that women have to create life and protecting it as a man, what we see is the opposite, that there is a level of disrespect projected towards women, and as a result, we see the different levels of interactions between men and women are structured in a certain kind of way to where men dominate women. And it all goes back to, I personally believe that it goes back to this need for us to have that same, or this yearning for us to have the same creative ability as women. But what's deep about it is when you are in a state of balance with your female counterpart as a man,